Again, Kevin Culp, PM Head of Cloud Management Solutions here at Supermicro, continuing our podcast on SCC appliance in a bare metal configuration. So we're installing SCC as a bare metal appliance in air gap mode with one NIC architecture. Second NIC is not required to be connected to a network. So a couple of things I want to talk about before we dig into the rest of the install is this idea of the offline installer. So if you're looking to issue a air gap mode install or deploy an air gapped install, you must reach out to Supermicro employees or SCC personnel to get those offline install bits to be successful. So that'll be part of your pre-flight check. And if you recall or remember in the previous video, we took both of the offline installer, dumped it into our temporary folder we called SCC Cube, and also our software bits we pulled from the portal that is a Supermicro portal, which is a production build. So a couple of things I also like to review here is much of our fetch operation for software dependencies relied on that offline installer. Things that we actually pulled, such as Virt Manager, Bridge Utils, all of these are various software dependencies. Likely, if you were connecting into online mode, you would connect into the internet and pull them down from mirrors. But because we have a zero trust architecture in an environment where we can't rely on basically pulling down those online installs, likely a classified SCIF, or your posturing is very much focused on zero trust architecture, you're blocking most of these ports, which would give you an unfavorable install and frustrate you. So we're providing the offline installer as a mechanism to provide those software dependencies. So let's dig into the install here. So we're going to choose B option, which is back up to the main menu, and we'll choose B option. And the next thing we're going to do is choose option number 2, set up our host network. I want to talk about option 3 too as well. Is if you recall, we had that virtual machine layer that was in between the host layer of where our physical NICs were, and then also how we bound each of those NICs to bridges for bridge 0 and bridge 1. Although we still utilize bridge 1 and we bind the second NIC to bridge 1, we're not connected to any type of top of rack switch or any type of network cable that's connected. And also, the idea here is that above that virtual machine layer is basically the K8 pods or K cluster that we rely on, where basically SuperCloud Composer rides on top of that, and those that Supermicro IP for SuperCloud Composer exists within those pods. So let's choose option number 2. Let's kick it off and execute it. And then what we're going to do is configure both option 1 and option 2. We're going to set up the SCC networks first, which are the physical NIC configurations. Those configurations would be in the first NIC. So the first NIC is your enterprise network or management network where those monitored hosts exist, such as your BMCs. And so we're going to choose that option for the physical NIC. And then we're also going to choose option 2, which is required to bind to the second bridge interface, which is bridge 1. And then we're going to define our static address. If you'll notice here, option 2, we can get a DHCP scoped address from your management enterprise network if you do not have any IP address assignment. So make sure you reach out to your network administrator and not plug in wrong IP addresses or utilize duplicate IP addresses, because that will cause a lot of aggravation on your part of getting SCC installed successfully. So we're going to choose option number 1, and then we're going to plug in the IP address of the bridge 0 interface. In this case, it's going to be 172 192.24.199.46 is the bridge IP address. We're going to give it a mask. You can use either a sitter notation or network mask. We're going to use 27 as the subnet mask, which is a 255.255.224. We're going to give it a gateway address, and our gateway is going to be 172.24.199.46. And let's just make sure we plug in the right addresses, and the gateway is, I'm sorry, .40. So .40 is the gateway, 46 is our IP address for our first physical NIC. So make sure you have those IP addresses plugged in correctly when it's prompting you to go through the network configuration. Otherwise, you might isolate your server and not be connected, and then have to rely on the BMC to go back in and adjust those IP addresses so that you can maintain a successful SSH connection back in. Because navigating around the BMC can be sometimes a little bit frustrating because you don't have command line recall. Some of those options don't exist within the BMC, so it could be a little bit challenging for you and probably frustrating. So let's plug that gateway in, and then the next thing it's going to ask you for is the DNS entry. In an enterprise corporate network, you'll likely have your primary, secondary, and tertiary that you have defined in your enterprise corporate network. We're just going to utilize 8.8.8.8.8 for 8s, which is our Google Friends. They provide a great DNS for us on the internet. And so we're going to choose that option. And the next thing we're going to do here is specify the entry for secondary. In this case, we're going to use the empty string to skip that option. So if you had a secondary, you would plug that in. And then let's just review quickly our generated net plan config here. We have an IP address of 172.24.199.46 with a 27 subnet. We have also the gateway is 172.24.199.40, and then the rest we left blank here. So we'll continue with the net plan here. It'll go out and basically build your environment as far as your scripts are concerned for the bridge configurations themselves. Notice there may be a slight cause and network interruption with SSH, but in our case, it looks like we're good there. Configures the VXLAN information for the CNI network. And then the next thing we're going to do is choose option number 2, which is our NAT server IP address. We're going to use option number 2. Again, you could use a DHCP address if you wanted. We're going to provide it a static address. We're going to plug in the address of 172.24.199.41 as our NAT IP address. Again, it's going to prompt us for the mask. In our case, we're going to use 27 as a subnet. So both of those need to be in the same particular subnet itself. And remember, if you're configuring your top of rack switch for tagging and VLANs, you want to make sure that you give them in the same IP address subnet range and your VLAN is configured correctly on your switch. Otherwise, you'll run into problems with pinging and being able to have reachability. So watch out for that, right, when you're actually configuring your environment. So we're going to use option number the option for a 27-bit subnet, which is 255.255.255, 3255s and a .224. And then we're going to also provide our gateway address, which is going to be the same 172.24.199.40. And we're going to plug that in, and we're going to give it its DNS address entry of 8.8, our friends at Google. And then we're going to skip the next one And then we're ready to to go back to option B, back to the main menu. So we've completed both option 1 and 2 for the setup of the host network. We're going to click there or return. And then we're going to now move into the VM virtual machine managed network itself. We're going to choose option number 3. And here is something I want to talk about before we get into this is really about the easy VM setup versus add VM. So, gee, Kevin, what is the difference? Well, in the add VM, you can add those virtual machines in, but they are indexed and they have dependencies on how they basically start. And there's a child parent relationship. So one particular VM may rely on another VM to successfully start. So there's sequencing involved in those VMs that get instantiated. So if you're a novice and you're not sure of that, by the way, it is documented in the documentation to show you those indexes and their relationships as far as ones that have to be instantiated and which ones rely on other ones to start. We document that in the install guide. But if you're a novice user, choose option number 1. It's easy. It's going to script you and set everything up for you. So we're going to choose option number 1. And at that point, it's going to ask us to continue. You'll notice here it's now provided default 10 subnets in our CNI network itself, and we're going to hit yes and continue. And then while this is basically executing in the background, we are actually creating these virtual machines through this indexing, sequencing of instantiating those. So we'll let this cook in the background. We'll continue on with this install here with you. Thanks for joining today. We'll see you next time. We'll see you on the other side. Have a great day.